Money Has No Smell, The Africanization of New York City by Paul Stoller.
The prologue starts out with talking about street merchants that are outside the Museum of Modern Art. They make masks and other art made out of wood. They have multiple narratives that they embody: primitivism and modernity, business and romance. Money Has No Smell. Money Has No Smell is based on an intermittent fieldwork undertaken in New York City from July 1992 to 1998. The fieldwork consists mostly of participant observation in the streets along 125th Street and Lenox Avenue and 116th Street and Lenox Avenue, both in Harlem. Participant observation. Participant observation is when an anthropologist takes part in experiences and being in studies while carrying out the research. The author said he spent much of his time hanging about, listening to conversations, then finding a place to write them down in the gist of these exchanges.
This dream of America is like a virus.
There is the perception that money grows on trees.
That's the first thing that changes. The reality of that America is not what you thought it was. You have to sometimes pretend that everything is okay because people can't believe, how can you be the great America and claim that you can't make it? It's like going in the gold mine and coming out with nothing in your pockets.
You have to work. You have to work you have to work.
It is a very tough city. You always got to do what you got to do to survive.
And I've talked to people, a month after they come here, they go, no, I'm not going to live here. I can't live like this. But you know what? Suddenly someone will realize, even though I'm scrubbing toilets, I'm doing all these menial jobs, but this money I've made in a month, it's a lot of money.
You got to represent, you know? You just don't have to come from back home and you love your family, come over here, best opportunity, and come to sleep.
Within the last 10 to 15 years, you have seen a tremendous explosion of African entrepreneurs.
Employing thousands of people that the Africans have brought to New York. When I came here, 18, 19, this is one of them.
People have seen that they are not able to get traditional jobs because they have to have a green card, a blue card, a red card, a yellow card. So they do odd-end jobs, create an environment, save their money, and become entrepreneurs.
You know, most of my brothers cannot afford to live where their children will really see the American dream.
The first school I started going to was one of the baddest schools in the Bronx. Like, some students bring guns, some bring drugs, some bring meth. It's just like they're going to a war zone or something.
They're coming to America with a dream. But many of these black residents have not experienced the dream, they've experienced a nightmare in the United States. So sometimes that idea clashes.
I'm not afraid no more. Even where we live at, they don't like us Africans, but I'll be like, you have a problem? Too bad. You better deal with it.
If you want to know whether you're going back home or not, just listen to the accent of your kids, and you know you're not going anywhere.
Most Africans feel that they are going back. You might have stayed here 20, 40 years. We are always thinking we have to go back. And most of us are going back in a casket.
The biggest success that I see is the unity that we have. We succeeded in holding the culture, because for you to lose your identity, it's like you're going to lose your future.
The chapter starts with talking about the conditions that these merchants have to work in. Old, bleak days, very cold weather. Even though January is the slowest and most difficult month, the street merchants are still out there so they can make money to afford food and provide for themselves and their families. Isifai Mayaki is an African merchant that Paul Stoller, who wrote this book, interviewed. Isifai is unregistered status, so it is difficult finding health care, obtaining licenses, and finding wage-paying work with benefits. And there's always the possibility of being deported. Many of these African merchants hold 2 jobs, working 7 days a week, and sleep only 3 to 4 hours a day. Invisibility. It talks about how Issabei is one of the thousands of black men who blend into the background of Harlem. He's a Muslim, he's a cosmopolitan African merchant who earns money from African Americans, most of whom only a partial understanding of his culture or his economic sophistication. For more than 15 years, West Africans have steadily poured into New York City. Most of these immigrants, most of them men, have not formally been educated. They are traders or unskilled wage laborers, not diplomats. Many of them make a living as street vendors in Harlem, Brooklyn, or Lower Manhattan. Culture. Culture is a set of ideas, behaviors, norms, values, and worldviews of a group that is learned and passed down from generation to generation. In these markets, there is art sold by people from many different cultures that are unique to these cultures. Amongst these street merchants, they share informal vending space with Americans, Jamaicans, Koreans, Chinese, Vietnamese, Ecuadorians, Mexican, Pakistanis, and Afghanis.
Chapter 2, Urban Intersections. This chapter starts off in the markets of Harlem and New York. Stoller highlights the adapting of the African traders from when they first started selling like African products to then counterfeit name brand stuff. He also talks about the social networks, you know, like how the housing was the device on navigating the city, and like how they had to depend on each other to really bring the market up. And just this chapter talks about like the idea of money being more than just money for them. This also like helped the families back in Africa, and it kind of like served as a bridge between the U.S. and Africa with them. Chapter 3, The Way of the Jaguar. So this chapter talks about like the migration struggles and like the cultural identity that's happening around this market and the African traders. So first being the migrating struggles, you know, the immigration laws, the discrimination all created kind of like a bad setting and a way for the traders to start in the market. The global dynamics, they really helped out by bringing like goods from like Africa and all into North America, kind of like a like informal economy that like linked in the local like area. Also, it'd be like how resourceful they were. They weren't really open to really much resources, but they were able to put like money together from saving groups to like fund ventures and stay afloat in like the bad economy they were in.
Money has no smell. Chapter 4. In this chapter, it dives deep into social networking and a lot of things along that line. These West African traders need to be very good at communicating, and they need to work together to make connections to use as their advantages. With good connections comes access to information, resources, and steady support. They need this to manage their living and working in a foreign environment. Constant support and time can lead to their success in America. Trust while networking. These people need to have high value and trust. Trust forms business relationships and much more. This trust can also help with challenges living and working, like said above. Networking function. The chapter also explains how they strategize upon going to community events, sharing what they have to offer. Also, it explains how they engage in assistance from pooling resources and getting help from professionals. Relating this back to class. These West African traders need to have great body language and openness when networking to, again, build their profile. Code switching. Code switching has a huge role in networking and community bonds. These West African traders need to bond with the New York City citizens. They code switch based upon their audience, gaining a better social context and helping them form better relationships. Money Has No Smell, Chapter 5. In this chapter, it explains the challenges when building a network. Factors like cultural barriers and these people trying to adapt can be super difficult. Speaking different languages can also create misunderstandings, which can make it more difficult for them. Trust issues can also be a factor in the competitive market. You need to build up your profile, and that negatively impacts them. A big thing the author also explains is financial concerns. These people have limited access to resources that can hurt their ability to invest in business growth. Overall, it's just hard to take advantage of new opportunities. This chapter also explains how they provide loans to one another to help out, which is pretty cool. Also, putting your name out there on the market helps your case out. Mentorship. New concerns by sharing knowledge can help them navigate the market and establish their business. This also builds a supporting community. Relating this back to class. Skin color plays a huge role with the struggles. They often face discrimination due to their skin color and immigration status. This can hurt their ability to secure business opportunities, so they need to make really good bonds in order to get away from that.
In Chapter 6, titled Regulating Urban Life, Stoller opens a chapter describing two traders from Senegal receiving their vending licenses to be regulated by the state. They were routinely visited by inspectors who did not fail to find them at almost every inspection, leading to thousands of dollars in fines. Global capital restructuring has marginalized groups, leading to poverty and the growth of the informal economy. The definition of culture is a set of ideas, behaviors, norms, values, and worldviews of a group. The culture of West African merchants can be seen in New York City. West Africans tend to migrate to New York City to get away from the poverty of their own country and set up informal enterprises. West Africans learn to acculturate in society, which means learning another culture, such as that of Americans, in order to make sales. The rise of the disenfranchised working class stems from the formation of service industries to manage the global disbursement of manufacturing. The disenfranchised working class can be related to criminal activity involving the transportation of drugs and an unorganized workforce. In the 90s, the sale of bootleg cassettes, CDs, and merchandise was extremely popular in New York and beneficial to the African economy. Yet the states could somewhat regulate these actions through the construction and reconstruction of law in an invasive manner. West African vendors can find ways around the worries of permits, licenses, and even social security cards by renting them. It is extremely hard for immigrants to obtain these legal documents. They are usually disregarded by authorities. It is clear that in the 90s, immigration significantly increases legally and illegally. This is due to economic change and new immigration laws. Chapter 7, The Spatial Politics of African Trading in Harlem. In 1994, the 125th Street Vendors Association, a union of African American vendors, threatened to shut down 125th Street Market if the mayor made good on his promise to disperse the African market from Harlem. There were many people in support of the vendors, yet just as many people against them. A plan by Masjid Malcolm Shabazz was endorsed to move the 125th Market and charge vendors a $100 fee, essentially considering them legal. Those against the vendors didn't necessarily dislike the sales, they disliked the clutter and unregulated presence the vendors caused, which would later become intensified. The West African vendors seemed powerless and oblivious to the outside world, yet they had their own systems of politics within their cultures, and some agreements and disagreements in regards to Shabazz's plan. The Senegalese were against the plan and felt like they were being bombarded by those in higher powers. This created conflicts between the African Americans and the Senegalese. Vendors share their stories on their time in New York through the chapter. Idrissa Dan Inna expresses the struggle of lack of linguistics, reducing the amount of sales being made. Language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols, organized into particular rules that are used to encode and communicate a group's experiences of the world. With lack of linguistics, many immigrants struggle to make the sales they need to survive in the economy. The language barrier even led to miscommunications between protesting the takeover of the 125th Street vendors. Politics became more of an issue between vendors, and police got involved, making the situation more intense, in an attempt to prohibit street vendoring. City Hall conflicted the thoughts of vendors by putting words in their mouth to the public, which created even more animosity from the vendors. Vendors were eventually dispersed by the higher authorities.
Chapter 8, titled The Immigration of Capital, focuses on how African immigrants in New York City navigate the city's economy, especially in terms of how they handle money. Stoller looks at the unique financial practices these immigrants bring with them, such as informal saving groups and community lending systems, and how these practices shape both their individual lives and the broader economy of the city. The chapter uses symbolic and interpretive anthropology to show how money is not just a practical tool for survival, but also carries deeper cultural meaning. For these immigrants, financial practices are tied to their identity and sense of belonging. In this way, handling money becomes more than just financial transaction. It's a way of maintaining culture and community. Stoller compares the financial practices of African immigrants to a rite of passage, where individuals go through important changes in their lives, such as moving from relying on others to becoming financially independent. These practices can also be seen as a rite of intensification, which strengthens the bonds within the community. By pooling money together and supporting one another, they reinforce their shared values. The chapter also looks at the contrast between these informal financial practices and the corporate structures of mainstream American capitalism. Corporate systems are more rigid, but the financial systems used by American immigrants are more flexible and communal. Through ritual inversion, these practices challenge the traditional way of doing business, showing how immigrants' financial strategies resist and sometimes change the dominant capitalist system. As we finish the book, we're left thinking about how money, business, and morals are all connected. Stoller shows us how money flows easily across borders without being affected by culture or ethics, but this also makes us wonder if money can really be neutral or if it will always bring moral challenges with it. Since the book was written, the world's economy has only grown more complicated. New technologies like digital currencies and faster global trade have made the relationship between money and morality even harder to understand. The issues Stoller raised about how money impacts people's lives and decisions are still important today. In the end, the book makes us wonder how money shapes our choices. While money itself might seem neutral, it carries weight because of what it causes people to do. The big question is whether we can change how we think about money or if the system is too powerful to change. One thing we know for sure is that this conversation will continue for a very long time.